we get so stuck when we take away our own choice, when we disempower ourselves and tell ourselves we have no choice. Yeah, we might have two terrible choices. That sometimes that's the reality, but we have choices. And when we start to realize that and re-empower ourselves in that way, it really changes so much about this whole conversation around boundaries.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions, Mental Health Counseling and Behavioral Health Counseling in Iowa.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am our vice president in charge of the behavioral health department. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today is a returning guest. We've got Alyssa Decker here with us today. You'll remember Alyssa from the episode High Conflict Relationships, previous episode, wonderful episode. And Alyssa is a divorced mother of 5 living in Texas. She is the owner of 2 small businesses. She's an author, and she helps work with individuals that are in high conflict relationships, helping them to navigate those situations, helping them to reduce stress and the anxiety, to work through that boundary setting that is really, really necessary when it comes to feeling safe, feeling authentic, and being able to process through the ways that those high conflict relationships really impact us as human beings. So welcome, Alyssa. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm really excited to be back with you today.
We are very excited to have you here. So, since the last time you were here, I know your businesses are just always evolving. You're always doing new things with your coaching. Do you have any updates for us, new things that are going on?
I do actually. It's been really exciting. I think it's been maybe close to a year since we last talked, and I would say pretty much everything has changed at this point, because things do kind of constantly evolve, and I'm always trying to come up with new and different ways to really meet the needs of my clients and listen to the feedback that I'm getting. And so, right now I'm doing a couple of things. The first one is I'm doing a free Facebook challenge every month that really teaches some relationship skills. We're right now in the middle of what I'm calling the Conflict Confidence Challenge, and there's about 700 women participating in that challenge. And so yesterday we had the conversation about boundaries. I called it the conversation about boundaries you never had. And so, my whole approach and my whole style is like, I'm just going to give it to you straight. Like, I'm going to give you the truth. There's no sugarcoating. And if that's not for you, then that's cool. Like, you can go find someone else who will sugarcoat. That's easy to do. So, then I also have the Conflict to Connection now, which is my group coaching program. We have groups of between 8 and 12 women that go through this 8-week intensive program where we meet twice a week. And we talk about everything from communication skills to boundary setting to dealing with overfunctioning and overcompensating to rebuilding self-trust. That's a big topic inside that program. And so that's been really fun. And I'm also in the middle of launching a membership called the Connection Club, where members can get some monthly mini courses on topics just like those. So it's been really exciting to see things really growing and taking off, but more importantly, to hear women's stories. And what I hear a lot is, I'm 60 years old and no one ever told me what boundaries really were. Or, I've been married 25 years and I didn't know it was okay to do this or that in my relationship. And and so that's just it's always encouraging and exciting for me to hear those stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is a lot of new stuff that you have going on. Can you give us some more info on your conflict confidence challenge? Like, what are some things that you're focusing on? I know you said you just did boundaries yesterday in boundary setting, like more info on what goes on in that challenge. Do you have like different tasks every day, or what kind of people can expect from that?
Yes, yes. So the link to sign up for my challenges is the same every month. It's peacefulresolve.com/speak your truth. Speak dash your dash truth. I can send you that link so it can be in the show notes. Um, and we do 3 challenges rotating. The one that we're doing now, conflict confidence, we have 5 days. I go live every day at the same time. Day one was the truth about keeping the peace. So we talked about the consequences of not speaking up to avoid conflict and how when we do that, we're not really avoiding conflict, we're just kind of moving that conflict inside of us. And it's not really peace. It's kind of a pseudo peace. We tell ourselves, oh, this is great, we're not fighting, but we're just fighting with ourselves. So we talked about that, yeah, the first day. The second day was about boundaries, and when I taught about boundaries yesterday, we really dug into like how a lack of boundaries over time will really erode our own trust in ourselves and how we are violating our own trust in ourselves, our own peace, and our own safety when we have no boundaries. Today we're talking about regulating how learning how to take that pause and that deep breath and take a minute to regulate a little bit before we respond so that we can respond instead of react. That's tomorrow's topic. I'm just flipping through my notes. And then Thursday, we're talking about when they push back. So when you start doing this kind of stuff, if you're in a high conflict relationship, there's one guarantee, and that is you're going to get some major pushback from the people in your life who have been benefiting from your lack of boundaries. And so we talk about how to deal with that pushback. And then on the last day, um, we are um, we're talking about going from just surviving to learning how to trust yourself, walking in that self-assurance that like I've got my own back and I know what I need and I know how to support myself on this journey. So we go through 5 days, and then at the end of those is when I open my group coaching program so people can join me to take things deeper. So we're in the middle of that right now, but we'll be doing that again at the end of April or end of May. Sorry, this is the end of April. We do it every month. So if someone's interested in joining one of those challenges, they can join pretty much at any point for the next one.
Yeah, and what a great way to combat some of that isolation that so inherently can come with being a part of a high conflict relationship or in a
Yes.
relationship. There's so much isolation sometimes that comes with that, and so being able to say, "Okay, I'm in this group. These are other
Yes.
women who are experiencing these things," and also that fear that's sometimes used in abusive relationships where sometimes the abuser will try to push that fear of like you're the only one who's going to see it this way, right? Or you're the
Yeah.
only, like if you say that you're going to sound crazy, you're going to sound this way, right? Nobody's going
Yes.
to see it the way that you see it because I'm perfect, right? So
Hmm.
being
It's never
able
my fault.
right. So, so being able to have a whole group of other women who do see it the way that we see it because they've experienced that as well. They know what some of those tricks are because they've experienced them too.
Yes.
Is such a powerful way to combat that intentional isolation that really can be part of the abuse.
It really is. I encourage every participant at the end of the live or at the end of my life to go live later that day and share about their homework. And it has blown me away, the community that has formed and has come together. Because women will go live in the group and they'll talk for 2 or 3 minutes about their situation and the comments that come in to support them. I have heard over and over again, this is the first time I've ever told my story in a way that I felt like someone got it, like someone saw me. And when they get 20 comments saying, "Me too, I can totally relate to that." Just like you said, it breaks that that belief maybe that they have that they are the only one. It eliminates that isolation. And it's a really beautiful thing to watch.
And I love that you focus on self-trust because there's kind of this different understanding about self-trust, I think, in our society where there's a lot of focus on integrity, and self-trust really is integrity. But integrity has such a connotation of I'm having integrity for the benefit of other people, right? I'm
Yes.
doing what I say I'm going to do for other people's benefit. And so when we say, well, that person has high integrity, we tend to think of it in society as, well, they have high integrity, so that's a person I can trust to do things for me, right? To do
Hmm.
what they say that they will do and maintain that trust. But really, the other side of integrity, and I think the more important aspect of integrity is that we can trust ourselves to do the things that we say that we're going to do, or do the actions that we feel are aligning with our values. And the sense of peace that comes with knowing that, no, I can trust myself is immeasurable. And I think that's the most important part of integrity.
Yes.
We tend to see it from the opposite side, right, in our society.
Mhm.
And so therefore we then don't value it as something that we're doing for ourselves and not for other
Yes.
people.
Yes, I think that's a great point. I use this illustration all the time of myself when we're talking about self-trust, and I think many people can relate to this. I've gone years and years, probably since my first baby was born, having this conversation with myself every week. On Monday, I'm going to start eating healthier, right? On Monday, I'm going to start exercising. And it got to the point where it was kind of ridiculous because like there would be this whole conversation in my head of on Monday I'm going to eat healthier, and the other part of me is going, "No, you won't. You say that every Monday." Like I didn't even believe myself anymore. And I think it's a very relatable example, but that just kind of is a way to think about self-trust. If you're constantly telling yourself things and not following through and not doing the thing, the first step to rebuilding self-trust is to change those conversations, right? To stop saying, "I'm going to do it on Monday," if you know you're really not. And if you say that, then do it, right?
Absolutely.
Um, and also, when you say it and you don't do it, give yourself a lot of grace, but be honest with yourself. The conversation might be, "Okay, I didn't do it this Monday, and I should probably stop saying that, but one of these days I will when I'm ready," right? It's a whole different conversation than constantly telling yourself something and not following through.
Absolutely. Well, and there's research on depressive symptoms that says that the expectation that we hold versus the reality that we experience, the gap in between those is an indicator of depressive symptoms. So it might not be an indicator that we have major depressive disorder, but it is an indicator that we might be more susceptible to those depressive symptoms. And so the same is true with integrity. So integrity is when the gap between what we think we should do or want to do and the thing that we say to ourselves that we're going to do and the thing that we actually do are together. That's where we get integrity. And when there's a gap between that, then again, similar to how with depression, that expectation versus the reality, when there's that gap, we're more susceptible. With self-trust, when there's a gap between them, we're more susceptible. So the way that we can close that gap is, yeah, we can adjust our behaviors, but so often the skill that is more attainable as we're starting that process is that we renegotiate this expectation of ourselves. And so
Yeah.
it is a huge skill. Boundaries are a huge skill. Setting boundaries, maintaining boundaries. But a different skill that is so important in these is negotiation, renegotiation of expectations. And with somebody else, that can look like, well, you sent us an email today or yesterday, right? And said, hey, I got to renegotiate. Well, you didn't say I need to renegotiate, right? But basically, what your email said was, I got to renegotiate the expectations of the time frame of this podcast, which is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful boundary setting and relationship and trust building the day before the podcast, right? Or a couple days before the podcast.
Hmm.
What breaks trust isn't the changing of the expectation or the changing of the agreement. It's the doing it without the communication that
Yes.
causes that challenge. And so the art of renegotiation can trip a lot of us up because we go, oh, I'm going back on my word, right? Or I'm whatever.
Hmm.
But as long as we do that communication ahead of time, we renegotiate the time frame, uh, then we're doing exactly that. We're changing that based on what our need is. And then we are having integrity to others and to ourselves because we are maintaining the agreement that we have renegotiated.
Yes.
And that's such a challenging thing to do. So I love that you are talking
Hmm.
about that, talking about self-trust and that integrity, because it is such an important part of not only how we relate to ourselves. Can I renegotiate that? Hey, I'm going to start eating healthy on Monday, right? Can I renegotiate that with myself, right? To
Right.
say, like, no, on Monday, I'm going to make myself a really energy dense breakfast, right? That's going to bring me to lunch. That's a negotiation and an expectation for myself that I can probably do. But
Hmm.
saying, well, on Monday, I'm going to start eating healthy for the rest of my life, I can't do that, right? I'm
Right.
automatically set up for failure when that's my
Hmm.
expectation of myself.
Yes.
Whereas if I negotiate that out with myself or renegotiate that out with myself, then I haven't made a promise to myself that I can't keep. And I can
Exactly.
have integrity with myself.
Yes. And I think it's such an important conversation to have because we're not even aware a lot of times that we're doing this. Like it's not something that we consciously think, oh, I've just broken my promise to myself. So bringing awareness to it, I think, is the first step. And so many women in my challenge are like, I have never actually thought about that before. And so I love that because being aware is the first step to being able to make some changes.
Yeah, and you talked about like boundary setting like with ourselves, like for example, with the like I'm gonna start eating healthy on Monday. Can you give examples of do you usually have people start with setting boundaries like with their partner or to themselves or like what examples might you have them start setting in a relationship if they're struggling with that?
So I like to always start the conversation with what a boundary actually is and what it looks like because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around that. Yesterday we had this conversation about boundaries and I described a boundary as kind of being, you have your little piece of property, you have your fence, your house and your yard, and there's a fence around it. And if someone comes into your yard without permission, that's a boundary violation, right? Your fence is supposed to protect your space and you should, if you have good boundaries, be opening and closing the gate for the people you want to allow in or the behaviors you want to allow in. And but then I gave the illustration of, well, sometimes, we have tended so poorly to our fence, to our boundaries, that the whole thing is just blown over and it's just laying on the ground. And then we tend to have the conversation in our own heads that says, well, if my fence is on the ground, do I really have the right to expect someone to stay out of my yard? Do I really have the right to even have these expectations? Um, and of course, the answer is yes, but it's your job to re-erect the fence. And that's where that clear communication that Julie was just talking about comes in, right? If your fence is blown over and it's been laying on the ground for years and people are just coming in and out, when you put that fence back up, you got to have some clear communication and say, okay, I know I've allowed these things in the past, and now I'm not going to anymore. And here's my expectation. Here's why. So some examples of boundaries. There was an example in my group this week. Someone had talked about this thing that triggered them, and they were like, "I just want to tell that person they can't do that thing anymore." Can I do that? And I said, well, yes, you can do that, but that's not a boundary. You can tell them, I don't want you to do this thing around me anymore. But a boundary is about you. And the only kind of enforceable boundary is when the consequence or the enforcement is something you have control over. So if you say, don't do that thing around me anymore, and they do it, what are you going to do about it? Right? You can't force them to stop. I say all the time in my group, we can't change or control anyone else. If we could, we would have already done it and we wouldn't be here because everything would be great. But we can only change and control what happens, for us inside of our house and our fence. So the boundary that we worked on this particular case, she was like, they do this thing, it triggers me. I want to tell them to stop. And I said, okay, fair. But what does that actually look like? What's going to happen when you tell them to stop and they don't? Because that's probably what will happen. Like, let's just be real. And so she was like, oh, I never thought about that. Like, I just thought I was going to tell them to knock it off because it bothered me and it was all going to be good. And I was like, nope, that's not a boundary, first of all. And it's not likely to happen, right? If you have someone in your life that has been doing something that hurts you for years, most likely the first time you tell them to stop, it is not going to change the entire pattern of behavior. And so she was like, well, what are my options? And I said, well, you can say, if you do this thing, I'm going to leave. I'm going to walk away. If you do this thing, then we're going to take a 30-day break and we're not going to be in the same room for 30 days. You can do anything you want, except it has to be about what you are going to do. And it is up to you to decide how strong that fence is going to be. Like, are you going to have a chain link fence? Or are you going to build an 8-foot tall stone wall? You get to decide. And I loved it because one of the women in the group yesterday, she said, I've never thought about it this way, but it's kind of like I have a stone wall on the side of my yard where my sister lives, and I have a chain link fence on the side of the yard where my best friend lives. And that's okay. Because these people have a different way of relating to me. They respect me in different ways. My best friend respects that chain link fence as a boundary, and my sister doesn't, so she gets the stone wall. And I thought that was really a beautiful illustration. But because you're in control of your boundaries, but it has to be about you. It has to be about what you're going to do. Another example. From my group, we were just in a conversation last night with someone who has someone in their life who doesn't follow through on things, like is constantly promising to do things and doesn't ever do them. And she was like, how do I set a boundary around this? He doesn't finish any projects and it's frustrating and I'm so angry. And I said, well, again, it's about what you can do. So if the example is, he promised to build you a deck and he hasn't done it in 5 years, and you have a half a deck for 5 years. What you can't do is force him to build the deck. It's not going to work. But you've already eliminated that option. So now you have a couple options. You can say, honey, I love you. I'm really blessed that you want to build this deck for me. But if it's not done by the end of the summer, I'm going to hire someone to do it. And then you do it. Like you can use this technique in your life in many ways. You could say, if you have a partner who gives you the silent treatment, you can say, hey, this thing has to be decided by Friday at 3 p.m. And on Friday at 3 p.m., this is what I'm going to do if you've chosen not to have the conversation with me. And then do it. Do the thing. Because you've given them the clear communication. And you've given them the opportunity to participate and they've opted out, right? So these are examples of these are examples kind of like I give in coaching, but sometimes people just need to hear that it's okay to do those things. I have one client who has dealt with silent treatment for 20 years. And I said to her, I gave her that illustration of like Friday at 3 p.m., this is what I'm going to do. And she was like, I can do that? And I said, yes. Yes, you absolutely can do that. She's like, that's not rude or disrespectful. And I said, honey, the silent treatment is the rude and disrespectful part. The lack of communication is the rude and disrespectful part. You are communicating, right? And clear is kind. So you can absolutely do that. So those are some examples of really practical ways that we can set boundaries and also do it in a way that protects our peace, right? That's ultimately my group and my coaching practice is called Peaceful Resolve Coaching. And the underlying thing in everything I do is how do we create peace for ourselves? Stop outsourcing that. Stop looking for someone else to give us peace. How do we create it for ourselves? And these kinds of boundaries go so far in doing that, in creating that peace for ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, that main piece that I think gives boundary setting kind of a bad reputation sometimes, right? Or where we start to think about that stigma, like, oh, am I being selfish if I do that? Am I being, right? All these thoughts that aren't super helpful to the process. But I think a lot of times those come in because we might have seen boundary setting without the follow through, or we might have seen boundary setting modeled to us without the communication about the boundary setting. So
Hmm.
if I don't tell my husband, hey, if it's not done by the end of the summer, I'm going to hire so and so and they're going to get it done this fall, right? And if I tell them that, then absolutely, right? We can let go of so many of those negative thoughts about it that come towards us. But so many times we've seen maybe pieces of this process modeled, but without the full picture, it's ineffective. And so then we think, oh,
Right.
I'm just causing more conflict by doing this and not resolving it. So that the communication piece, absolutely essential. Without it, we can't set the boundaries. The person has to know because they're making a choice. And sometimes the other person wants to make a choice without making a choice, right? So that
Yes.
default, right? I never said I wasn't going to build the deck, and so
Oh, but you
we
did,
say
right? Your word,
not
your
making a
actions are a
choice
language.
is a choice,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so then we establish that situation so that inaction or not making a choice is making a choice because we've outlined what that inaction means as the choice that the other person is making. And so,
Yes.
and the other piece of it is when we're thinking about our boundaries that we're setting, we got to think about, okay, is the outcome of this that I'm saying I will do, I will hire a person to create this deck, uh, is that something I'm willing to do? And so, because if I say that and I'm not willing to put out the money to hire somebody to do that deck, right? Well, then that can't be the communication that I give to my partner. I have to say something that I am willing to do. And so,
Yes.
another option is, okay, uh, I'm not willing to hire a person. And so maybe I need to, for my own peace, need to let go of the idea that my husband is going to build this deck, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm not able or willing to hire somebody to do it. And so maybe I need to adjust with that. How can I get the need met? Of having a deck, right? Maybe my dream is I want to have this deck because I want to sit outside. I want to have a place to be when the kids are playing in the kiddie pool, right? I have this idea and maybe I can adjust that down because I can't control my husband. I can't make him build this deck. And so I love that. And the other kind of litmus test on a boundary is, am I going to get this need met either way? One way or another, this need
Hmm.
is going to get met. And so if I say, well, I had these fences, but they're all down on the ground because I haven't enforced them, right? And people walk through my house as a shortcut all the time, and I've allowed it. The goal is that people don't walk through either way. So whether I put up fences and I put up signs and they respect that, that's a great way. That's the ideal way that I would have the outcome of people don't walk through my yard anymore. The way that I would not prefer, but that I'm willing to do, is that I will call the police when somebody walks through my yard.
Right.
I've got the signs up. I've communicated with the person via the signs. Hey, this is private property. Do not walk through here. And so I don't feel guilty at all calling the police if they walk through. Right? And so either way, one way or another, nobody's walking through my yard. Now, I don't prefer the one where I call the police. Like, that's a pain in the butt for them. That's a pain in the butt for me. But I
Hmm.
will do it because that outcome is going to be met one way or another.
Right. Yes, and that's part of rebuilding self-trust and having your own back is making sure that your needs are being taken care of. But the other thing I think that comes into play here is so many times we have this fear, if I do this, I'm going to get all this pushback. Like he's going to be really mad if I do this thing. And so we have to be prepared for that too. Like there are definitely instances where if you set a boundary, you might lose a relationship. You might, there might be all these consequences that we're afraid of that keep us from enforcing boundaries. And then the conversation, I think, has to be like, what's more important to me? Like, where are my priorities here? And if I'm afraid of losing this relationship, if I think that might happen, am I willing to let that happen? If I'm not, what does that look like? What's a different boundary that I could set? Like, how? So I know, like, I find that when we start having this conversation about boundaries, there's a lot of resistance that comes when people are really afraid of how other people are going to react, or they're afraid of losing a relationship, and um, and that's a very real thing. Like, especially if you're married to someone who, or you're in an intimate relationship with someone for years who doesn't respect your boundaries, that can be really hard and really challenging. And I don't want to just gloss that over and say, oh, if you have boundaries, everything's going to be great. Because sometimes it's not. Like sometimes people will walk away or they will break ties with you. But the other side of that I think we have to consider is at what point do we say, I have to take care of myself here because I'm the only one who can. I'm the only one who will. And how much more, how much longer am I willing to continue to basically throw myself under the bus and leave all my fences on the ground just to maintain this relationship with this person who doesn't get it? And those are really tough questions that we're not going to be able to answer here in a 60-minute podcast. But I just want to acknowledge that because I think sometimes when we have this conversation about boundaries, it can sound like, oh, it's as easy as clearly communicating what I want. And it's not. Sometimes it can be really scary and there can be some really big issues that come into this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, and so the example of, hey, nobody walks through my yard, I'll call the police on my neighbor, that there is that very real possibility that my neighbor could become aggressive with me, right? Could be
Hmm.
become violent with me, or could be angry with me and, tell everybody in our small town, oh, this person called the right. Like
Yes.
there are all of these consequences or potential consequences to following up on the boundary that we've set, and then we weigh those out. So like for me, I absolutely will call the police on my neighbor, right? But when we're thinking about intimate partner violence, right, or history of intimate partner violence, when we think about like there's another neighbor that I probably wouldn't call the police on, right? That I've got. So there are those factors, and they're all a part of the processing. I think that's why it's so great having the group because if we can dig into each of those situations and go, yeah, why am I not okay with calling the police? And what else can I do that makes that? If I say, well, the neighbor on the one side of me walks through, and I call the police on all the other neighbors that walk through, but I don't call the police on this one, right? Because they have a history of violence, maybe. Okay, now what is the thing that I can do though that allows me to still have that outcome that I need of nobody in my yard,
Yes.
especially not a violent person in my yard.
Right.
So when it comes to that violence component, absolutely, those are real factors, and we need to really be aware of, well, what are some of the follow-up things that maybe I need to do to protect myself as I'm following through with that boundary? And then the other piece being the attachment part of it all. So
Yeah.
those of us with attachment wounds, especially from a young age, are going to have feel more pain when there's the threat of another person severing ties with us or getting so angry that they no longer, it changes the relationship, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so when we're aware of our attachment traumas and our attachment style, then we're much better able to say, okay, yes, there's the chance that this person, I could set this boundary with my sister, and my sister could not talk to me for a year because that's her boundary. I've got to be able to be okay with that. I've got to be able uh, to heal and intentionally heal and work on my own trauma wounds and my own attachment traumas that are influencing my fear that my sister
Hmm.
will never talk to me again, right? Or that my friend will be so mad at this, or that my neighbor will be so angry that he will tell other people in the town, and then other people in the town will be mad at me, right? Those are because of trauma. Those are because of attachment challenges and
Hmm.
attachment traumas in previous lives. So when we are intentional about those things and we understand, like, why is it so scary that a partner who treats us badly might not be our partner anymore, right? And it is very scary.
Yes.
But so many times, when we really dig into that, we can see, like, yeah, it is scary because I don't trust myself to be alone, right? I don't trust that I can
Hmm.
take care of myself by myself, that I can provide for myself by myself, or that I can get my emotional needs met without this person. And because attachment breaches are challenging for me because I've got attachment trauma, right? So when we
Right.
understand that, then we can really be able to set up those boundaries that might come with a severed relationship and
Hmm.
really be able to see that for what it is.
Yeah, I think you make a really important point there is that sometimes our ability to set boundaries is very much tied into our healing journey. And as we heal from trauma, we become more able to set healthy boundaries. And so if you're just starting out on this journey and you're still dealing with a lot of trauma and you still have attachment wounds and you might only be able to put up a chain link fence at first. And that's okay. Like you can upgrade later. That's the beauty of boundaries is you do what you can to protect your peace. And also, this has a full circle effect here because the more we start to protect our peace, the more capacity we have to heal and to do the trauma work. And so, I think the two things very much work in tandem. We need to be doing our trauma work, our healing, so that we can set better boundaries, and we need to set boundaries to give us the space and the capacity to do the trauma work and the healing work. And so as we do both of those things, like it just sort of it's like a stair stepping kind of thing. We're not going to be able to start up here. Nobody starts up here. We all have to work through the stages of doing this. The other thing I hear all the time when it comes to boundaries is what do you do with the passive aggressive responses? Like, what if I tell my neighbor he has to stay out of my yard and I lock my gate, and then his response is just to play loud music at 3 a.m. because I can't, you just told me I can't control him, so now what? And so that's another place I think we get hung up is we think, well, like, there's all these things that they can do to me if I start enforcing boundaries that maybe I won't be able to do anything about. But one of the things that my I say all the time to my clients is there's no I can't. You always have an option, you always have a choice. There's no I have to, you always have a choice, right? I could say, I use this illustration all the time because it makes me laugh and it usually I think resonates well with people is I have a choice. Literally everything I do, I have a choice. And if I was to wake up tomorrow and decide I wanted to murder my lovely neighbor and bury her in my backyard, could I do that? Yes. Would that be a good choice? No. Would I end up in prison? Yes, and I should. But I have a choice, right? And we disempower ourselves so often by telling ourselves, I have to do this. I have no choice. I have to leave my fence on the ground because I can't deal with the consequences of what will happen. Or if I have to leave my fence on the ground because my neighbor's going to play loud music at 3 in the morning if I don't, right? There is no have to. You get to choose. And sometimes both choices are incredibly hard, but you still get to choose. Um, I got a little sidetracked there, but back to the passive aggressive thing, the neighbor who plays loud music at 3 in the morning because you ticked him off because you put your fence back up. We get in this mindset of I can't do anything about that because that's his house and his yard. Well, yes, you can. You can buy earplugs. You can buy a noise machine. You could go to the extreme of soundproofing your whole bedroom, but you have choices, right? And so I think that's such an important part of this conversation too, is like we get so stuck when we take away our own choice, when we disempower ourselves and tell ourselves we have no choice. Yeah, we might have two terrible choices. That sometimes that's the reality, but we have choices. And when we start to realize that and re-empower ourselves in that way, it really changes so much about this whole conversation around boundaries.
Yeah, we use the Getting Things Done system by David Allen, and uh, one of the natural planning model steps, the first one is called bad ideas. And so any decision we're making, right? Like where do I go to eat at the restaurant? How do I keep people out of my backyard, right? Any of those any of those decisions that we're trying to make, right? If we're making a decision, the first step in that process is bad ideas. And so bad ideas frees us from having to think of good ideas. So we write down every bad idea that comes to our mind, including, well, I could kill my neighbor, right? And then we sort through it, right? So we write down all of I could move to Texas, right? And then I wouldn't have that neighbor anymore. There are those pieces that we write down because we get those ideas out of our head before we prejudge those ideas. Because,
Mm,
kill my neighbor is one that I'm gonna go, okay, consequences of that, right? I'm not going to do so. I'm going to mark that as a bad idea when I'm sorting through my list. But move to Texas, I might have written that down as a bad idea. But if I'm renting this house and I go, wait, I've been renting this house for like 5 years. I haven't looked for 5 years at what else is available in my town that might be comparable and might not be next to this neighbor who's going to retaliate to me all the time, right? So I wrote it down as a bad idea, but actually, maybe that is an option for me that I can explore, right? Or maybe some of the other ideas that I wrote down as bad ideas, there's actually pieces of them that
mm,
might
yeah.
work or might combine with other things, right? And so that what you said about choices, right? We have choices and we tend to judge those choices ahead of time before we even think them through, right? We go, it's
Mhm.
ridiculous to move. But is it, right? Or it's ridiculous to soundproof my entire that side of the house, right? But is it? Like my mother-in-law put up a fence about this wide where they sit so they can't see the house next to them. Right? This big. It's
Awesome.
the rudest fence ever, but I love it so much. It was a necessary step, right, for them to do. So, we kind of have these ideas like, well, I could put up a fence this big and not have to see it. Yeah, that's exactly a good idea. But we might judge that idea before we even think it through or process through if there might be pieces to that that could work for us. So
Yeah.
um, I love that. And then yeah, I always say one of the things that I remember learning in college was like, yeah, I could wake up this morning and fly to Paris and I don't have to wear shoes. Like because every single day I am making the decision to stay in Iowa in my house and do my job and not fly to Paris this morning, right?
Hmm.
Every time I walk outside, I'm making the decision to put shoes on my feet. I don't have to. Um, and so I love that. And I one time I was working at a debt collection agency, and they were doing this leadership program with us, and they said, "Okay, here's a list of different things that might be annoying to you in your life. What are the things that you have control over, and what are the things that you don't have control over?" And I remember one of them was your boss, and almost everybody put, I don't have control over who my boss is. And I put, yeah, I do.
Mm.
I have complete control over who my boss is, right? There are
Yep.
certain people that I trust. So yeah, I'll let them boss me around all day because that's called leadership. But there are other people that can't trust that person. No, I'm not going to have that boss one way or another. I'm not going to have that boss be my boss, right?
Yeah.
And so just that idea that you're talking about like we have choices that we might not even consider. We have choices that we take out of the running immediately before we even get to process them. So giving ourselves that permission to like just get them down, like just get them down on paper or in a note on your phone. All of the terrible, terrible ideas you would never ever do to resolve this issue, right? I could put up an electric fence, like all of those and then go through and sort them through as like, okay, these are ones that if I did that, what might happen, right? What might be an outcome of that?
Yes.
And dreaming through those pieces that we might otherwise cut off at the click.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful. So we we didn't really get to talk about your books yet this time, and I know we wanted to because your book is Relationships Are Hard and Other Lies That I Believed, and I am so interested to hear about this. But I loved this conversation that we had, and I just love the things that you're doing with your group because it again it brings away or takes away some of that isolation that is such a tool
Yeah.
of the manipulative partner and such a strong side effect of these kinds of relationships.
Yes, for
That
sure.
boundary setting, breaking it down, I think is so important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you could give one suggestion to somebody maybe on the fence about starting counseling or starting the group coaching or maybe going like, I might check out the Facebook challenge, right? I might just check that out and see what's going on there. What suggestion might you give that person?
Well, it's interesting because you just touched on it and you're in that last little segment that you did where you were talking about choices. I think the thing that I would say is don't be afraid to get curious. Start asking questions. Ask questions of yourself. If you're in therapy, ask your counselor questions. Ask for action steps. If there's a little niggling thought at your back of your head, like, I don't really know how to do that thing that she's telling me to do, say that. Like, ask the questions. How do I do that? What's my first step? What's my second step? What's my fourth step? Um, I hear a lot of times in coaching from women who have been in therapy for years and years and years, and they're like, I've never learned about boundaries. I don't know. I had someone who went through my group coaching and she said, oh, like now I think I understand how to do that thing my counselor told me to do. And I think here's the thing is coaching therapy, it's all these challenges. There's so much value in it, but we're sometimes afraid to ask questions and we're afraid to get curious. And we feel like if we go there, we don't really know what's going to happen. Like I'm going to open this can of worms and, all of these things. But what I find is the people who grow the most and the people who heal the most are the ones that ask the questions. And there is no such thing as a stupid question when you're in therapy. I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure sitting in your seat, you would probably prefer actually the client who comes in and asks a lot of questions so that you can really help answer those questions and guide them. And so that would be my advice is get curious, ask questions, ask all the questions. There's no such thing as the wrong question or too many questions. Um, and that alone, I think, will make such a difference in your healing journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. Well, thank you so much for joining us again. This was great information again. And if you are listening and interested in getting set up with coaching with Alyssa, her website is coachingwithalyssa.com or alyssadecker.com. And then she's also going to give us her Facebook challenge link. So we'll have that linked in the show notes as well.
I'm Alyssa Decker, and I need a counselor.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236.